Hello everyone, my name is Jarod Lopez, and today I will talk you about communicative language teaching, also known as CLT. And first, to understand this teaching method, we need to know about its historical background. Language teaching has seen many changes in its ideas about its design and methodology in the last 50 years, and CLT prompted a rethinking of approaches to its design and methodology. We may conveniently group trends in language teaching in the last 50 years into three phases. The phase number one, traditional approaches, on the late 60s. The number two, classic communicative language teaching, from the 70s to the 90s. And the phase number three, the current communicative language teaching, from the late 90s to the present. In the first place, they were In the first place, they were based on the idea that grammar could be learned through direct instruction and through a methodology that made much use of repetitive practice and drilling. It was assumed that language learning meant building up a large repertoire of sentences and grammar patterns and learning to produce these accurately and quickly in the appropriate situation. Techniques that were often employed included memorization of dialogues, question and answer practices, substitution drills, and various forms of guided speaking and writing practices. In the phase number two, a reaction to traditional language teaching approaches began and soon spread around the world as older methods fell out of fashion. The notion of communicative competence was developed within the discipline of communicative language teaching, created a great deal of enthusiasm and excitement when it first appeared as a new approach to language teaching in the 70s and in the 80s too. And language teachers and teaching institutions all around the world soon began to rethink their teaching methods and classroom materials. In planning language courses within a communicative approach, grammar was no longer the starting point, and since that point, the idea of language teaching totally changed. This teaching method was pioneered by British linguists and applied linguists, and among these, the most prominent name in the early stages was D.A. Wilkins, a professor of linguistics in the University of Reading, who proposed a functional and or communicative definition of language that serves as a basis. This teaching method emphasizes interaction as both the means and the ultimate goal of study. Language learners in environments utilizing CLT techniques learn and practice the target language through interaction with one another and the structure too. And, and the use of the language in class combined with the use of the language outside of the class. It establishes that an effective knowledge of a language is more than merely knowing vocabulary and rules of grammar, because learners need to be able to use the language appropriately in any social context. Theorists agree that meaningful communication supports language learning and that classroom activities must focus on the learner's authentic needs to communicate information and ideas. So, in summary, CLT is focused on learning to communicate through interaction, like conversation, dialogues, and role plays, with the purpose of acquiring the language through discipline but entertaining practice. But how can we apply this teaching method in our class? Well, as we already know now, the communicative language teaching is based on the practice and interaction. So these are some activities to develop in the class. The first one, a role play. It is a communicative activity that allows the students to play a certain role, putting themselves into somebody else's shoes. Students get to interact with their peers and with the professor too in a supported environment, developing experience and trying different strategies. You may need to give your students some instructions on what to say or how to act. And the class will see the students acting out the scenario in the personality relevant role chosen for them. The second one, describing a picture. The students will practice how to tell stories in the chosen tense. For example, they can tell a story in the past. In pairs, one describes a picture to his partner. The partner will draw a picture according to what he hears from the explanation. And the student holding the picture will have to describe it to his partner, who will start drawing what is being described. The last one, telling a tale. You must group your students in a circle, and you will need a small ball in your hand and start by telling the first sentence of the story. You have to invent a total new story and pass the ball to a student. They will have to continue creating the story and passing it again to the next student. You can adapt it and modify it to create poems, short stories, or songs. This teaching method is one of the most effective to learn how to communicate with others in an efficient way because it is not only focused on what happens inside the classroom, on the contrary, it tries to show us different situations of the real life, improving the acquirement of fluency and naturality of the language. Thank you.